With all the talk of systemic racism and white privilege, we started this podcast to give you a perspective that you rarely hear. Welcome to Fully Charged. We're your hosts, Kendall and Sheila Qualls. And with all the talk in our country, again, of systemic racism and white privilege and how bad things are for Black Americans, we thought that we would start the year with a recap of where we are, how we got here, and where do we go next. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. For 100 years after the Civil War, Black American families were intact at over 80%, despite the hardships and mistreatment that they faced in their day-to-day lives. In fact, both sets of our parents lived through the Jim Crow era in our country.
That's right. So what has caused this catalyst for change that we see today, really in our lifetimes? And there was a program that was launched in 1962 called Aid to Family with Dependent Children, as part of the Great Society program of President LBJ. Now, again, at that time, 80% two-parent families. It was the first time in American history where the federal government financially incentivized women to have children outside of marriage. In fact, this program was heavily marketed by progressives in major cities across the country.
And soon after that, we start to see a significant decline in marriage rates in the Black community, even though they had been virtually identical among all ethnicities up to that point. But by the 1990s, out-of-wedlock births had spiked to over 70% in the Black community.
That's right, Sheila. Keep in mind, all of this happened literally within a 25-year time frame, from the late 1960s to the 1990s. We saw this huge initiative reverse the trend of marriage and marriage rates without one initiative to reverse the trend. No one in the Black community, no one united around this whole problem that we've had around fatherless homes until now. I'm not aware of any other organization calling for a national movement to restore the nuclear family other than TakeCharge. And we're calling for a return to faith, family, and education. We launched a video in the last few days that focuses on restoring marriage in the Black community.
Once you find that person that you're supposed to marry, that God has for you, that it's totally worth it. Like, jump right in with both feet. And I would encourage women to get married, to stay married, to love God, to raise their kids if they have any, and just be a light to your family, to your community, to everyone.
I hope you get a chance to watch it. It's just 3 minutes long, powerful segment.
It's really sad when you think about all those children who were born into situations that they didn't make themselves. But after 50 years, we have the data that reveals what happens to children when they are born into fatherless homes. It's tragic. It's very tragic. Many times, it's tragic for people even outside of the Black community as these kids come of age. Look at the data. 70% of juveniles in state prison from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts, fatherless homes. 80% of rapists are from fatherless homes.
We have become a culture in crisis. We see it every day in the news, in our public schools, and in the public square. Boys from fatherless home become men, but are lacking in the guidance and discipline that a father provides. I'm inviting men and women from the Black community to join our movement to make this an issue of priority number one to help us reverse this trend. All the other issues in our community are boiled down to this one issue of fatherless homes and restoring the family.
And the tragic part is that the story that we're being told is that this is because of racist cops or over-policing or systemic racism. The real issue is that we have 5 generations of boys and girls that have been raised without a father in their lives. And progressives have been less than honest with telling us that about the problems in the Black community.
Yes, less than honest is a kind way of putting it. The left claims that our disparities are due to racism, and I estimate that 90% of our problems in our communities are created by the high percentage of fatherless homes that we see today. That started with the social welfare dependency of the 60s and that still exists today. For example, look at the income disparity by ethnic groups in this chart. You can see from the chart and on the far left that Asian Americans earn nearly $100,000 per household, with Black Americans on the far right earning the least at just over $45,000. Now, we're told by the U.S. that the U.S. Census data that you see here is proof of systemic racism. However, if you peel the layers back of the data, you'll see that there's a direct correlation between household income by demographic and the percentage of fatherless homes in these communities. Many of these communities that are prospering don't need government assistance.
What's interesting also about this data is if you look at it from another perspective of like poverty, we see that poverty is reduced dramatically compared to marriage rates within the same ethnic group. Marriage makes a significant difference in improving the lives of women and children.
You know, that's why we're starting this campaign to promote marriage. You would think that starting something like that would make common sense, but sadly, we're not talking about common sense. We're talking about something else. There's a political agenda of diminishing the importance of the traditional nuclear family, and that's why we're initiating a campaign locally, here in our state, and nationally on this issue of marriage.
Yeah, we do believe that there has been an orchestrated campaign to undermine the traditional nuclear family. These two professors facilitated a workshop to a group of professional family counselors on why the traditional nuclear family reinforces white supremacy and should be considered unfair, much like white privilege.
Absolutely right, Sheila. And this is why we started Take Charge. Someone needs to stand up for truth. And we have been compelled to do this, and we're doing it all for the right reasons. It's not for political reasons. This is a right and wrong issue. And, so much so that we have people from the Black community that are joining us every month to help us with this message. We get emails from across the country asking if we're starting a Take Charge chapter in Houston, Los Angeles, Memphis, New York City, everywhere across the country.
Well, that's our recap for this first issue or edition of the year of Take Charge. Thank you for watching. This will actually be my last episode of Fully Charged. We're breaking up, and I am moving on.
Sheila's talking about the podcast, not our marriage. It's not like Sonny and Cher. We're still together. Things are well. Things are doing fine. Just like peanut butter and jelly, we're still together. Sheila, why don't you explain to people what you're going to be doing?
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm starting a new podcast that's going to be directed at issues that impact women. Women who are loyal to their principles and aren't easily influenced by the popular narrative we hear today put out by many, many groups in our society. Women who won't compromise on values and priorities. So stay tuned, more on that to come. But we created this podcast to counter the prevailing narrative and to give you another side of the story that you never hear. And if you like our podcast and believe in what we're doing, please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star rating, and most importantly, sharing our podcast with your friends.
Well, Sheila, we're looking forward to your work in the coming weeks ahead. And that's it for this edition. To find out more about our work, go to our website at takechargemn.com, and please consider supporting us. Your support helps us spread the message, and we'll be back next week with more of the perspective you never